Hey everyone, so today we're talking about something that's been very topical in Australia lately and it's been making headlines around the world, and that is SPF. So as a general background, Australia has some of the strongest regulations when it comes to SPF, and that's because we have one of the highest skin cancer rates in the world. So it's something that Australian consumers take pretty seriously, we all take seriously, because the Australian sun is harsh. And when we choose our SPF, especially one that's been rated by the TGA, or the Therapeutics Good Administration, we trust that we know what we're getting, that the labeling is accurate when it comes to the SPF protection factor. So recently, Choice, which is a consumer group in Australia, tested a whole bunch of very popular supermarket and chemist sunscreens, and this included, the classic Cancer Council sunscreens, Banana Boat, and even more sort of fancier ones like Ultraviolet. These found out that most of them, like 90% of them or 95%, all failed their SPF levels. So instead of having SPFs of 30 and 50 as they proclaimed, it was far lower. And in the case of Ultraviolet, their testing had an SPF of 4. So it was pretty shocking, because Ultraviolet is a very, very popular sunscreen brand in Australia, and it shocked Choice so much that they actually decided to test the Ultraviolet one again. It returned the same reading, and ultimately Ultraviolet pulled the sunscreen off the shelves, because once they tested it independently, they found out that it just wasn't returning the results that the labeling suggested. So, with this, it begs the question, well, is sunscreen even worth it at all? Because for a lot of us, especially ones that can't wear mineral sunscreens or physical sunscreens because it leaves a white cast on the skin, we're often resorting to chemical sunscreens, which apply a lot better, often make great primers, but, maybe some of the ingredients might be a little dubious or have mixed kind of, sort of results when it comes to, or are they hormone disruptors or not, for instance. So if we are kind of going down that path of wearing chemical sunscreens, we at least want to know that it's protecting us from the sun. Now, what I will say is that testing sunscreens and their SPF rating is very, very hard. And that's because everyone's skin is different. So it's hard to test sunscreen in a controlled environment. Now, it doesn't mean that your SPF should have a rating of 4 when it says SPF 50, for instance, but it can mean that how the sunscreen wears on your own skin and how the sun impacts you versus someone else can be completely different. So we aren't saying don't wear sunscreen, and on the contrary, we're saying wear sunscreens, wear different sunscreens, wear them more often, and wear them in conjunction with other sun-safe practices such as long sleeve clothing and hats and all of that. But I think the most important thing to note is that a majority of the sunscreens that failed the testing in this Choice scandal were made at a single manufacturer in Western Australia, and the testing had also been done, I think 50% of the official labeling testing had been done by a US lab. So it pays to kind of diversify your sunscreens a bit to make sure that they're made by different manufacturers, and that you're at least not getting the same result when it comes to spontaneous testing. But why I say that sunscreen's different on everyone, even though you're opening the same bottle of SPF 50, for instance, is because ingredients that we use, such as glycolic acid, BHA, such as salicylic acid, etc., they make our skin more photosensitive, meaning that we're more vulnerable to the sun's rays. So if you're using ingredients like retinol, you are also in this group. So someone who wears sunscreen on skin that's been treated with acids and retinol versus someone who doesn't use those products and wears sunscreen will probably have a need to reapply sunscreen more frequently and more often in order to maintain the same level of protection as someone who doesn't use acids, for instance. So that's something to consider. Secondly, our skin all has varying levels of thickness. So the thicker your skin, obviously it affords you a bit more protection from the sun's rays, and this normally includes skin types that are more melanated, because of course we tend to come from regions that naturally have a lot more sun, whereas fairer skin and white skin tends to be a bit thinner. The other thing is that we also sweat, and we might be exposed to water if we're in the pool, and these will also, you know, decrease the efficacy of sunscreen, even those that are considered to be waterproof. So the number one thing to do is to make sure that A, you are using a bunch of different sunscreens. Number two, that you're using enough sunscreen. So in K-Beauty, they do the 2-finger test. So when you have your sunscreen, you make sure you put enough to cover one finger, your index finger, and then your middle finger, and use these 2 fingers to apply to the whole of your face and neck. Thirdly, ensure that you are reapplying every 2 hours, and I get lazy with this, and you know, especially if people have oily skin or wear makeup, it might not be the most convenient thing to do, but to ensure maximum protection, it is an absolute necessity, and do it even more frequently if you've been to the gym or if you're in the water or at the pool or something like that. The fourth thing to do is to pair it with other forms of sun protection. So even though you might be wearing sunscreen, you will still burn if you're in the sun all day and the UV levels are high and you're not wearing a hat or something long sleeved or sitting under an umbrella. So just because you're wearing SPF doesn't mean that you're going to be protected from burning, and burning 4 times or more in your life greatly increases the chances of you developing melanoma. I think something like 50%. So it is quite serious. When you burn, you want to make sure that you want to prevent burning at all. So sunscreen is very important in doing this, but so are other forms of sun protection. So don't forget your hat. And this is why in Australia, you know, we have the no hat, no play rule. So it is a big thing here. Lastly, for extra antioxidant protection, and this is more for sort of those who have anti-aging concerns, because we do know that sunscreen is one of the best anti-aging ingredients out there. It will prolong the youthfulness of your skin because the UV rays are an aging factor, is to pair your morning routine with an antioxidant such as a vitamin C serum or a green tea serum if your skin doesn't much like vitamin C. So one of these antioxidant rich ingredients pairs so well with a sunscreen and will help keep you protected for longer as well. Now, if you are using retinols and glycolic acids and other acid exfoliants, use them at night rather than using them during the day, and during the day make sure that you're wearing a good SPF and a strong SPF, and then reapplying frequently to protect your skin. So ultimately, sunscreen is not a scam. It is very disappointing, obviously, that these TGA approved sunscreens did not meet the mark, and especially popular ones such as, you know, Ultraviolet and Banana Boat and Cancer Council, but knowing that 95 of them were made in the same lab in Western Australia might account for some of that. Now, there have been independent testings of various sunscreens from around the world, such as, you know, K-Beauty sunscreens, which have fallen into similar scandals such as Purito and Klairs. They've reformulated their sunscreens, they've been tested by multiple labs, and they all have great results. So it's always worth mixing your SPF collection with something from the K-Beauty world, or, you know, even a French sunscreen, for instance. So something that's manufactured in different areas and it's tested in different labs. If, you know, you are worried about things like hormone disrupting chemicals in chemical sunscreens, then opt for a minimal sunscreen, and if you have dark skin, go for a tinted mineral sunscreen. So that way you can wear your mineral sunscreen and you can have your tint and it won't make a white cast on your skin. So something like Unsun, they've recently discontinued their amazing product. We still have some left at Canvas Beauty, but they have a very good 100% mineral sunscreen that works beautifully on dark skin that's tinted, and it gives you this lovely airbrush look. We've actually got a separate video on that. So in Australia, there was a large study in the 90s that showed that even an SPF of something like 16 greatly reduced the incidence of skin cancer. So it's not that you need an SPF of 30 or 50 necessarily, although we do try and aim for that. Even an SPF as low as 16 greatly reduces the incidence of skin cancers. So that is something to keep in mind. So even if you are wearing a relatively low SPF, it doesn't mean it's not doing anything at all. And there are ways to get around, you know, maybe avoiding chemical sunscreens if you're concerned about particular ingredients such as benzoates, for instance. With every chemical sunscreen, mind you, it's only in some. In terms of vitamin D and getting your vitamin D fill from the sun, sunscreen is not actually going to prevent that. And to be frank, most Caucasian skin only requires a few minutes in the sun in order to get your vitamin D fix. Unfortunately, if you're darker skinned or you're Asian, our skin doesn't absorb vitamin D from the sun as effectively. So rather than skipping sunscreen and roasting out in the sun, your best bet is actually to take a vitamin D supplement. So the bottom line is that your best bet against skin cancer remains SPF in conjunction with other sun protection elements such as a hat and an umbrella. It is still the #1 ingredient anti-aging. There have been numerous studies on those who have worn sunscreen and those who haven't, and it definitely does lessen the incidence of wrinkles. Remember that if you are sweating, swimming in water, using acids, using retinol, these can all impact how effective the sunscreen is on your skin. And fourthly, don't be without it. Even with the choice scandal, just diversify your sunscreens, get them from different areas, because even a sunscreen with an SPF as low as 16 can greatly reduce the incidence of skin cancer, which is important in a country such as Australia.